Okay, so are you ready to dive into another fascinating deep dive into the Urantia book?
Absolutely, let's do it.
This time we're looking at paper 173. And wow, it's a bit of a powder keg, right? We're talking about Monday in Jerusalem, right after Jesus's, triumphal entry.
Yeah, talk about a Monday.
Right, the air is thick with anticipation, and well, I don't want to give too much away, but let's just say things are about to get really interesting really fast.
No kidding, especially when you consider where we're headed,
Mhm.
the temple. But forget any images of peaceful contemplation you might have.
Yeah, this is not your typical Sunday service.
Not even close. It's more like stepping into a bizarre. Picture this. Livestock crammed into pens, money changers clinking coins like they're running a casino, merchants hawking their wares. Not exactly the tranquil sanctuary you'd expect, right?
It's mind-boggling. It feels almost sacrilegious. So help me understand this. Why was all of this commerce happening in the temple?
Well, it's important to remember the historical and social context here, which is something the Urantia book really helps illuminate. Basically, it boils down to a system of religious obligation that had been, well, twisted into a money-making scheme.
Okay, so break it down for us. How did it work?
So you've got people coming from all over to pay their temple dues, right? But they couldn't just use any old coins. They needed specific Jewish shekels.
Ah, so that's where the money changers come in.
Exactly. They swooped in, charging exorbitant fees to exchange Roman currency for these required temple shekels, essentially preying on the faithful.
So it's like those airport currency exchanges. You know you're getting a raw deal, but you don't have another choice.
Yeah, spot on. But it gets even wilder when you factor in the whole animal sacrifice thing. Remember, the rules back then, as laid out in the Levitical law, demanded these animals be perfect, not a single blemish. And guess who got to decide what passed inspection?
Let me guess. Temple officials.
Bingo. Talk about a conflict of interest, right?
It's like a rigged game. I can just imagine these poor farmers showing up with their prized livestock only to be told, nope, that goat has a crooked ear, not good enough for the almighty.
You're catching on. And guess who conveniently offered pre-approved, perfect animals at a, shall we say, marked-up price? The temple itself.
It's like a holy racket. So we're talking about exploiting people's faith for profit, and it sounds like the Urantia book doesn't shy away from calling this out.
Not one bit. And it gets worse. The Urantia book mentions the temple treasury overflowing with what would be millions in today's money, while ordinary people struggle to make ends meet.
That's a stark contrast.
It really is. And the Urantia book points specifically to families like the Sons of Annas, a priestly clan notorious for setting up their own little mini-markets right there in the temple.
So they're like the original temple vendors.
You could say that. These guys were raking it in, and it definitely didn't go unnoticed by the people. In fact, the text even foreshadows their downfall, mentioning how they were eventually driven out by an angry mob a few years later.
Oh, wow. Foreshadowing. I can practically feel the tension rising.
You can cut the tension with a knife at this point.
So we've got this chaotic scene, this blatant disregard for the sanctity of the temple. How does Jesus react to all of this?
Well, let's just say he's not about to whip up a batch of fundraising cookies.
I bet. From what I remember, things are about to get a little bit, how should we say it, active.
Let's just say Jesus is not known for his passive resistance. The text describes this slow burn of righteous anger building in him as he witnesses this blatant hypocrisy. And let me tell you, you do not want to be on the receiving end of that kind of anger.
And we all know what happens when Jesus gets fired up. That's where things are about to get really interesting. And we all know what happens when Jesus gets fired up. That's where things are about to get a little bit, how should we say, active.
A little bit active? That might be the understatement of the century. Look, Jesus, he wasn't just about preaching against injustice. This guy took action. Direct action.
Okay, yeah, direct action. We're talking like full-on righteous fury, right?
Oh, you better believe it. The Urantia book doesn't sugarcoat it. It describes him grabbing a whip, like an actual whip.
Whoa, okay, things are getting real now.
Oh, it gets even better. He starts driving out the animals, cows, sheep, doves, the whole menagerie. And then he starts flipping over those money-changing tables, sending coins flying everywhere. Can you imagine the scene?
Oh, I can only imagine. The noise, the commotion. Talk about a statement. So wait, the people just let him do this?
Let him. Joined him.
What? Are you serious? They didn't try to stop him?
Nope. The Urantia book describes how the crowd, instead of, panicking or trying to defend this den of thieves, they joined right in. They were so fed up with the hypocrisy, and in that moment, they found their voice. Through Jesus' actions.
Wow. It's like this collective righteous anger just boiled over. They were waiting for someone to what, call out the elephant in the room. Or I guess the livestock market in the temple.
And Jesus, standing there amidst all the chaos, the overturned tables, the scattered animals, he quotes the prophet Isaiah.
Okay. And what's he say?
Oh, just a casual. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers.
Talk about a mic drop moment.
Right. It gives me chills
Yeah.
just thinking about it. This was a pivotal moment.
You know, it forces us to ask ourselves, like, what are our priorities? Are we so caught up in the everyday hustle, the business of life, that we forget about the true meaning of faith?
It's a timeless message, isn't it? It's as relevant now as it was back then. But while all of this was happening, while the people were celebrating the temple being cleansed, the religious elite, those priests and scribes, they were witnessing their authority vanish right in front of them. And they were terrified.
I bet. I mean, talk about a loss of control.
Right. It's palpable in the text. The Urantia book really emphasizes the fear that gripped them.
I mean, can you blame them? They see Jesus, this nobody from Nazareth, capturing the hearts and minds of the people, challenging their authority, their entire way of life.
And that's when they decide they've got to do something about it. And, well, it's not pretty. They begin plotting to eliminate him. But even they recognize they can't just waltz in and arrest him.
No way, especially not after that whole temple cleansing thing. It'd be political suicide. They needed a new strategy, something a little more, well, subtle, more subversive.
And that's where things get even more interesting. This very public spectacle, it throws a wrench into everything. All of a sudden, the issue of authority is front and center. And, well, in this society, in this time period, in this system that was so steeped in tradition, there was one group, one body that held all the cards.
You're talking about the Sanhedrin.
Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. The Sanhedrin, the ultimate authority in Jewish law.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't scholars of ancient Jewish law, break it down for us. What was the Sanhedrin exactly? Why was their authority so absolute?
So in a nutshell, the Sanhedrin was the highest court in Jewish law, kind of like, I don't know, your Supreme Court, but for religious matters.
Yeah. Ah, okay, so they were the big dogs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were the only ones who could ordain teachers, meaning if you didn't have their stamp of approval, you were basically a nobody in the religious world. It's like having a PhD in piety.
Got it. So they had this system, this hierarchy, and here comes Jesus, shaking it all up.
Shaking it, rattling it, turning it upside down, and the day after the temple incident, they decide they've got to take him down a peg. So picture this. Jesus is teaching in the temple courts.
Bold move after yesterday's events.
Right. But Jesus, he's not afraid of a little confrontation. So as he's teaching, a group of these priests and elders, these pillars of the establishment, they approach him all casual-like, and they hit him with this seemingly simple question. They ask, by what authority do you do these things?
Oh, I see where this is going. Talk about a loaded question.
Oh, it's a trap. They're trying to back him into a corner. Because if Jesus claims divine authority, bam, they can accuse him of blasphemy.
Which, let's be honest, wouldn't go over well with the powers that be.
Not at all. But if he says his authority comes from, men, well, then they've got him there too, because he wasn't ordained by them. It's a classic lose-lose situation.
So what does he do? Does he take the bait?
Oh, does he ever? But not how they expect. This is classic Jesus right here. Instead of answering them directly, he flips the script.
I like where this is going.
He hits them with this counter question that leaves them speechless. He's all, the baptism of John, where did that authority come from? Was it from heaven or was it from men?
Boom! Talk about turning the tables.
Right. And the Urantia book does this amazing job of describing the panic that washes over them. They know they've been outsmarted. If they say, oh, John's authority was from heaven, well, that opens up a whole can of worms, right? They'd be acknowledging a power higher than their own. But if they say John's authority was from men, well, they risk inciting the anger of the people who absolutely love John the Baptist.
They're caught between a rock and a hard place, all thanks to their own little power play.
Exactly. And Jesus, he sees right through their hypocrisy. He knows they're not actually interested in the answer. They just want to discredit him. So he refuses to answer their original question.
Oh, I love it. What does he say?
He just like, nope, not going to tell you. Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things.
That's amazing. This whole episode is like a masterclass in what? In challenging the status quo, in calling out hypocrisy no matter who it's coming from.
No kidding. But Jesus isn't done yet. He's about to take this whole confrontation to a whole new level.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. What does he do next? pull out a scroll and start dropping some more knowledge.
Even better, he starts telling stories. But not just any stories. We're talking parables.
Oh, here we go. Parables. Those seemingly simple stories, but with all those hidden depths and layers of meaning. This is where things get really good. This is where things get really good.
Oh, yeah, you said it. This is where we really see Jesus's, I don't know, almost like his genius for connecting with people. You know what I mean? He wasn't just up there lecturing or quoting scripture. He was painting these vivid pictures with his words, stories that would stick with you long after you heard them.
He was a master storyteller, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like he just instinctively knew he had to find a way to bypass all the intellectual gatekeeping of the religious elite and just talk to people right to their hearts.
Yeah, directly to their hearts, to their gut.
And so he tells three parables in this section. There's the parable of the two sons, the parable of the absent landlord, and the parable of the marriage feast. And each one, they're all different, but in their own way, they expose the hypocrisy of, the religious leaders, and they reveal something deeper about faith, about what it really means to follow God.
Okay, so let's take a look at each one. Let's start with the parable of the two sons. I always found this one so interesting. It's about this father who asks his two sons to go work in his vineyard.
Exactly. That's the basic setup.
Oh.
And of course, one son, he's like, nope, not interested. But then later he's like, fine. And he goes and does the work. And the other son, he's all, oh, yeah, Dad, sure thing. I got you. But then he never actually, does anything.
Classic.
I mean, it's total classic.
Yeah.
And it's such a brilliant way to highlight this point that Jesus makes over and over again, which is that it's not enough to just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk,
Actions speak louder than words.
1,000 words, exactly. And I think what's particularly striking is how the Urantia book, it connects this parable back to those religious leaders,
Yeah, totally.
They were so focused on meticulously following all the rules, the letter of the law, that they completely missed the spirit of it, the heart of what it meant to be a person of faith.
It's so easy to get caught up in the outward appearance of things, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. It's so easy to fall into, even today, right? Like thinking we're good with God just because we check all the right boxes.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, have we ever been guilty of that? Like saying we believe one thing and then turning around and acting in a completely different way.
It's a question worth asking ourselves for sure. But Jesus, he doesn't stop there. He then launches into this other parable, the parable of the absent landlord. And this one takes on like a darker tone.
Yeah, this parable is always kind of, I don't know, sends chills down my spine a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It's about this landlord who sends out servants to, collect rent from his tenants, and it escalates quickly.
It's like, whoa, okay, things got really fast in this parable.
No kidding. So the tenants, they're like, nope, not paying. And they rough up the servants. And then when the landlord sends his own son,
They kill him.
they kill him, hoping to get away with the whole thing, thinking they can just inherit the property. It's brutal.
It's intense. But obviously, Jesus is using this to illustrate something much deeper, right?
Absolutely. He's drawing a parallel to how God's messengers, the prophets, were treated throughout history.
Yeah. And the Urantia book makes this really clear connection between the fate of the landlord's son and Jesus' own fate. Both rejected, persecuted, even killed by the very people they came to help.
It's almost like a prophecy in itself, right? Foreshadowing what's to come.
It's a reminder that sometimes speaking truth to power, standing up for what's right, it comes at a cost.
It does. And then Jesus, he shares one more parable, kind of like a grand finale, right? And he saves maybe his most subversive parable for last, the parable of the marriage feast.
This one's interesting because it feels almost like, I don't know, like a direct slap in the face to the religious elite, like he's calling them out directly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to their sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
So imagine this. You've got a king throwing this lavish banquet, right? And he sends out invitations, but the people he invites, they're all like, nah, too busy, or they make excuses, they just refuse to come.
Can you imagine being too busy for a royal invitation?
It's unbelievable. It'd be like winning the lottery and then being like, yeah, no thanks, I've got stuff to do. But that's exactly what happens. So the king, he's understandably a little ticked off, so what does he do? He opens the doors to everyone, good, bad, rich, poor, everybody. And their brother is invited to come feast and celebrate.
It's this beautiful image of, I don't know, of radical inclusion, God's love and grace just being offered freely, unconditionally to everyone.
Yes. And think about how that would have landed in that context. where you have these religious leaders who see themselves as the gatekeepers of faith. And Jesus is basically dismantling that whole system, showing them that it's not about status or power, it's about the heart.
It's powerful stuff. So we've got Jesus standing there in the temple courts, just hours after that whole cleansing episode, and he's systematically dismantling the authority of the religious leaders with these incredible stories, these parables that cut right through to the heart of the matter. How are they reacting to all of this?
Oh, they are fuming. The Urantia book, it doesn't mince words here. Their anger, it's reached a fever pitch. They are officially plotting to kill him.
It's crazy how this one day, this Monday in Jerusalem, becomes this major turning point, It's like from this point forward, everything changes.
Absolutely. This day set so many things in motion. And, it's moments like these that I'm so grateful for the Urantia book because it gives us this unique perspective, this incredible detail and insight into what was happening, what was going on in the hearts and minds of everyone involved.
It's true. It's like we're right there with them, feeling the tension, the excitement, even the danger of it all. So as we wrap up this deep dive, this powder keg of a day, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this exploration, this look at paper 173?
When it comes down to it, I think the most important takeaway is the power of authenticity, like truly living a life that's aligned with your values, even when, or maybe especially when, it's hard. Jesus, he didn't shy away from challenging the status quo, even when it meant putting himself in danger. He spoke truth to power. He offered this vision of faith that was inclusive and accessible to everyone, and that's a powerful, powerful message.
It is. It's a message that transcends time and place. So as we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with this question. What resonates most deeply with you from this pivotal day in Jesus' life? What challenges to authority do you face in your own life, and how can you respond with that same courage, that same compassion, that same authenticity? Until next time, keep asking questions, keep seeking truth, and keep diving deep.